So to fund the documentary, we applied for a government grant that's awarded to Canadian filmmakers from underrepresented communities. But unfortunately, our application was rejected. Surprisingly, I discovered that in Ontario, Asians are no longer qualify as racial minorities. Yeah, we have been delisted. Because apparently in Ontario, Asians have so much economic wealth that we're no longer affected by systemic racism. And I gotta tell you, as the official spokesperson for young, gay, super cute Asians, thank you, that this is totally ridiculous. Like, how can anybody from Toronto try and tell me that Asians aren't affected by racism?
That was comedian and producer Vong Shou, the official spokesperson for Gay Super Cute Asians. He is the creator of Rice Asian Comedy Showcase and founder of Comedy Cares, partnering comedians and charities to raise money for worthy causes. It is my great pleasure to welcome Vong to today's Community Partners Showcase. Hi, Vong.
Hello, Stephen. Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to our showcase. So that was a wonderfully funny clip from one of your shows. This really brings me back to the time where I actually went to one of your shows. I really enjoyed myself, brought a lot of friends with me. So do you miss all of that, the close proximity to the audience, the packed venues, the immediate face-to-face reaction, interaction? It must be really tough for you as a comedian performer in times like these, right?
Yeah, it's definitely different. Like I've been doing web shows and different things online, but it's not the same. There's just nothing that can replace that face-to-face interaction with the audience. And as a comedian, you have to be adaptable and use the digital medium. But yeah, I'm definitely really excited for when we can have live shows again.
For sure. But instead now, even though we might have to go for the second best, what are you exactly doing? You mentioned the podcast?
Yeah, so I do a weekly podcast that is taped live. So we broadcast live to Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, basically everything. And we take live questions. We talk about current events, and well, I guess I should say the name of the podcast is Rice, so it's just sort of taking on the same brand. So
Right.
it's three Asian comedians. It's me and Leonard Chan and Veronica Antipolo, and we just sort of share the Asian perspective on culture, sports, and trending topics. And it's really fun because even though we can't see people in person, at least we have like live questions being asked and we can interact with people that way. It's sort of the closest we can get. And as a comedian, it's actually kind of nice because, and as you've mentioned, you've been to one of my shows, but on stage, it's all stories about my life. It's all storytelling. So the podcast, it's nice because it's about current events and I just
Yeah.
get to sort of riff on what's happening, which I never done on stage before. So it's sort of like a different thing for me.
Was it more difficult than you thought to sort of keep things going? Do you
You
think
know,
the audience, sorry, do you think the audience, their needs have changed, all of that?
well, I think audience needs have definitely changed. In a lot of ways, looking at the positive, like I said, it is kind of hard not doing live shows, but looking at the positive, I do think, doing more digitally, like with a podcast, like with live streaming, like with YouTube, that was something that I wanted to do this year anyway. But then with the pandemic, that just sort of forced me to accelerate the timeline. So, because I do think with people, they want content in every single way. Like I know before with stand-up comedy, people wouldn't put their stuff online. They would just only do it at the show, and they were very protective of it. But I've always felt like comedy is more like music. Like people aren't going to come to your show if they haven't like heard a clip of you. Like they want to get a preview. So at least this way, it's a way for me to give more content for people because, you know, even at best, like say the most loyal person who comes to every show, that's once a month. But now they get to hear me weekly. They get to go to YouTube and get like weekly videos. They get to download the podcast, and that'll just help with the engagement. And you know, like you said, with the audience, I think that's how audience wants to interact with somebody now. They don't want to just see you once every few months. They want to like be connected all the time. I just felt like, you know, I've been doing comedy for almost 20 years. And this was the first time ever that I could honestly say the 5 best comedians in Toronto, in my opinion, or in Canada, were all Asian. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, that's just super crazy. So I was like,
Totally
let's get
crazy.
together.
Excuse me, did
Yeah.
you say you have been doing it for 20 years? Did you start when you were 5?
No, I think, well, first of all, thank you. But no, I started right about when I was 20 and I'm almost 40. My 40th
Oh
birthday is
my
coming up.
goodness.
So
It's like a big milestone coming up.
yeah, both the 40 years old and 20 years in comedy. It's a
Wow,
long time for
that's
both.
amazing. But you know, your job is to keep people entertained, to make people laugh. But in a time like this, really, it's tough on everybody, right? Do you
Um,
sometimes find it hard to keep the spirit high to continue making people laugh?
You know what's funny is that, you know, it's funny because there's a lot of people in my life and in the comedy industry I know who've had a really tough time because they're missing that connection. But to be perfectly honest, when I'm not doing comedy, I'm kind of like a hermit. Like in between shows, I usually just stay inside. Like during the pandemic, there's times where I literally, especially at the beginning, there's times I didn't leave the house for like 6 months. I know, not 6 months, gonna say for 6 weeks, where like, you know, I would get groceries delivered. Goodness sake, 6 months is crazy. But no, like there's definitely I think twice where I didn't leave for 6 weeks. I had my groceries delivered. I have a treadmill. I have an exercise bike. So overall, I think I've been really lucky just because I have all this exercise equipment in my home so I can get my exercise. And that's
Right.
because um, um, a number of years back, it's almost been 10 years now, I had knee surgery. I injured myself playing tennis, and so I had all this equipment already in my house. So
So you have
to
everything you
rehab,
need.
yeah. So I'm really lucky. And then I think because I think because I really like being online, like video games, I still have a lot of connection. And because I'm from Winnipeg, and I moved away from home when I was about 20, when I first started comedy. And um most of my like best friends and relatives are in Winnipeg anyway, so I'm just sort of used to like connecting with people
From a
like,
distance.
yeah, from a distance. Like, it's not the same, of course. Like I was supposed to go home to Winnipeg for November and December for my sister's wedding, and that's been
Right.
canceled. So it'll be the first time that I don't see my family for over a year.
Wow.
So, you know,
Mm,
it's definitely not the same, but at least I'm a little bit more used to being isolated.
right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine like a super cute Asian guy like being in isolation, you know? No, but I'm just saying, actually, you know, in a way you're lucky because you're a little bit used to communicating with your
Mhm.
friends and family virtually, right? So
Yeah.
I want to show you this clip before we get to the next question. Let's have a look.
I've never been intimidated by somebody's intelligence because I actually feel like there's always going to be somebody more intelligent in a relationship, but I actually think that it's the emotional intelligence that needs to be at a similar level. Because yeah, because I actually think this is really a really important topic in the gay community because there's a lot of very successful gay men in their careers, very intelligent, but because they came out later in life, their emotional intelligence was stunted. And I think that's a bigger factor because, like for me, I would never date somebody who hasn't like had their heart ripped out and crushed because I feel like once you go through that and you put yourself back together, there's an emotional maturity.
Maybe you could do that for somebody. Crush them. Help them grow up a little. Do you know what? Help them grow up.
I'd love to be somebody's crush, but not that kind of crush.
So that was a clip of you, Vong, when you guest appeared on CTV's The Social, and you were giving some dating advice. Might I say, very wise advice too. And you know the very, I guess, in Toronto, it's famous, the vibrant LGBT community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this community really suffered quite a bit from the impact of the pandemic as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the LGBT community has been hit pretty hard as we know with the pandemic. It's the marginalized communities um, that are impacted even more. So the LGBTQ plus community is definitely falls within that. There's economic hardships. There's a lot of LGBTQ performers who might not make like a regular wage. You're performing at bars and clubs and stuff. So
Yeah,
your entire income has been cut off. There's just a lot of people who, you know, as we all know, there's people who've been disowned by their family. They don't have the same
yeah,
support systems to be
right.
able to overcome the hardships. So yeah, it's definitely hit the community really hard. But I will say there's a lot of initiatives in the community. Like I saw, different local businesses raising money. There's been a lot of fundraisers for different performers like drag queens and such. People know that there's people in the queer community who don't have that steady income, and they've really come together and helped. But still there are definitely a lot of people who are struggling for sure.
For sure, for sure. I feel like this crowd is a socializing crowd, really, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that part is kind of ripped away from the community. Have you actually
Yeah.
visited the village since the pandemic started?
I actually, one thing I do is I take a daily walk um, down my neighborhood. So I live a few blocks from the village. So just to force myself to go outside, because like,
Right.
like I said, I'm a hermit. So my boyfriend actually got me to promise once that I would leave the house at least once a day. So it's sort of like my one daily walk. So yeah, I walk through the village, yeah, pretty much daily. And there's still some vibrancy there. Like people are really good. They're all wearing their masks.
Right.
And I will say the businesses in the village, for the most part, have withstood the quarantine so far. It's obviously very hard on all businesses. But like for instance, there's been 3 Starbucks that have closed around where I live. But
That's
then in
so
the village,
shocking, honestly. I'm saying this not with a joking tone. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you'd think if anything could survive, it's
It's
Starbucks. But
Starbucks. Yeah.
yeah, but like, in the village, like the village Starbucks is still there. And
Right.
hopefully this quarantine doesn't last so long that it impacts more businesses.
Right.
Obviously safety first, and the government's doing the right thing. If we have to go into another lockdown,
Right.
that's
Right.
definitely the priority. But it is nice that, for the most part, so far at least, a lot
Yeah.
of the village has their businesses have stayed intact.
Now basically everything, like all eyes are on the second wave. As the second wave goes rampant, what are your plans for serving the Asian Canadian communities in the foreseeable future? I mean, what I'm saying is that obviously your comedy
Mhm.
transcends race and I guess backgrounds, but a lot of your fans are Asian Canadians.
Mhm.
So what kind of challenges do you think you might run into? Are you confident we're all going to survive this and come out stronger?
Yeah, well, one fortunate thing is, and first of all, I do want to say I'm very appreciative of all the support from the Asian Canadian um, community. They've been so supportive of my entire career. Like I would say, if anybody ever comes to one of my shows, like literally half the audience are Asian Canadians. So they've really propelled my career. I will say one thing that I'm really lucky for with with Asian Canadians is, and not to be stereotypical, but they're generally very tech savvy. So I'm able to still connect with them. You know, basically everybody is, at least that I know, with the financial means, they've got, the latest cell phone or whatever, so they can still listen to my podcast and
Right.
follow through. And I think just delivering content um, that features Asians, I think is important. But also, we talk about a lot of Asian issues. Like
Yeah,
this week's topic on the podcast was, what's going on in Hong Kong with the mass resignations.
for sure.
Um, and of course, we've talked about how the pandemic has affected the Asian community, and even, the racism that came out of it, how people were blaming, China, the Kung flu, and all of this stuff.
Yeah,
So I feel like the best thing I can do is to be an Asian voice out there, because there's not a lot, like a visible Asian voice,
yeah.
and to talk about Asian issues, and also to bring on guests who are also Asian, and to shine a light on other Asian voices, I think is the best I can do.
I totally agree. Visibility and representation, they're very, very important. So I've been volunteer for Protech, Project Protech since maybe back in February. And what is your experience as a collaborator with Protech?
Oh, with Protech, I've been involved since the very beginning, even before we got the government funding. So I was part of the committee that helped put together the proposal, and it was an honor working with a lot of these professionals. We're working with you as well, because they're leaders in their fields. There's so many people in the medical field who worked and helped Toronto through the SARS pandemic all those years ago. Knowing you get to work with that quality of professional, and then to sort of bring your skill sets into it as well.
Right.
Because with a project this big, you definitely need a whole team. So I was sort of there to help lend my technical expertise.
That's so great, and I didn't know you were that multi-talented.
Oh.
I thought being a comedian is quite enough already. So where does one go to find all your funny performances and the new podcast?
So I just actually relaunched my website. It's www.vongshow.com. And if you go there, I just totally rebuilt it. It's still, I wouldn't say, let's say it's pre-launch, so you can get an early preview. There's still some pages I have to fill out, but that basically has information on all my projects. Like the first thing you see is it just shows all my projects. Um, it has clips of me on stage. It talks about different things I'm doing, like the podcast, and also things that are in progress, like in January we shot a concert film, and right now we're in post-production. So, we sort of give previews of what the concert film will look like. You can see that on the website. And then if you want to find me on social media, it's at Vong Show, at basically every single social media: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Periscope, literally anything that has social media, it's at Vong Show. And if you need to know how to spell it, it's like Gong Show, but with a V. So.
Yeah, it'll be on the screen and people will not miss that.
Oh, yes, yes.
It has been so pleasant to chat with you, because even the two of us, we used to play volleyball together, we're friends, and we haven't actually really seen each other for so long, right? So before I let you go, though, I do have one burning question I want to ask. So
Yeah.
how long have you been the official spokesperson for Gay Super Cute Asians? Has there been anyone challenging you for that wrong since you claimed it?
Oh, there's always a new generation. And as you know, with Asians, I actually think one of the fun things is to see the next generation come up and sort of, take your title from you. It's always nice. There's so many young, cute Asians in the village. And it's really great to see it. I will say, so I would say that specific title has probably been 5 years because originally the title was official spokesperson for young gay super cute Asians. And
Okay.
then when I was 35, I was like, I need to take the young out of this. This is like just getting sad at this point. So now it's just gay super cute Asian. So it's like all ages now. So
I was really just joking about, competition and all that, but our gay community can be a little bit bickering a little bit sometimes, but at the same time, though, it's also it can be a very loving place as well. So I think
yeah.
hopefully there's more love and more care and coming out of this sort of depressing time period. And
Yeah, I think if anything, it'll help make everybody just value each other more when we get back together. Like you sort of mentioned, we kind of know each other from volleyball, and like volleyball, gay volleyball is how I really met a lot of my friends in Toronto, and that league has 700 people,
right.
and those are 700 people I haven't seen in almost a year. So it
Yeah.
just makes you appreciate it even more, and hopefully when we get back on the court, it'll be even extra special.
Yeah, I look forward to giving you a very big hug.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Thank you so much, Vong.
Thank you for having me.